just to be very clear, what everything you've just testified to is purely based on estimates about weights and alcohol levels. Is that correct?
Correct.
Does it take into account the alcohol level of the drink? For example, let me put it this way. Miller Lite doesn't have as much alcohol in it as, let's say, a German beer, correct?
Correct.
Does it take that into account?
It takes it into account from the perspective that a drink is defined as one 12-ounce, generally light beer, of 4 to 5% alcohol by concentration, a glass of wine that's 4 ounces, or a shot of liqueur of some sort of spirit at 1 ounce of 100 proof. All of those things are considered the same one drink in this calculation.
So again, if someone's saying they had 4 beers, you are referring to a single 12-ounce American light beer. Is that
correct?
And if they're drinking something that doesn't fit into a single 12-ounce American light beer, this chart would not accurately reflect what's going on in the body. Is that correct?
Correct.
As a matter of fact, when you look at anything on this, all the warnings say this doesn't take into account how different people absorb alcohol. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
So a person
Good morning.
who's
Things cleared up, so I'm able to stick around
could
for
have
a little bit this
lower
morning.
or higher BAC based on the individual way in which they handle alcohol. Is that correct?
Correct.
It doesn't take into account whether or not they've eaten or not eaten. Is that correct?
Correct.
It doesn't take into account other environmental factors that could be going on. Is that correct?
Correct.
I think I even read somewhere it doesn't even take into account possibly their
Let me know if
mood
you guys
or
can't see the
whether or
screen
not they're
feed.
agitated or not. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, not knowing any of those things, whether or not they're having a good time, a bad time, any of that, this chart really is just kind of a guide. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And as a toxicologist, you wouldn't recommend somebody to pull out this chart to figure out whether or not they were safe to drive, would you?
No.
Under no circumstances.
No.
And to sit there and try to therefore determine based on a BAC what someone may have done earlier, this is insane just to use some chart, right?
There's too many variables.
Objection, Judge.
On what grounds?
You said there's too many variables?
Hang on. On what grounds?
Hey, what's the relevance of the question? Insane to use a chart for...
It's hyperbole, but overruled. You can answer.
I'll rephrase the question.
Fine.
It would not be accurate to be able for you to tell us exactly how many drinks someone had, even in a range, just based on a chart and what we're seeing. Is that correct?
Correct.
There's too many variables. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so if somebody is attempting to sit there and say, this is the number of drinks based on a weight at autopsy, without anything else, just based on that chart,
Jackie, I think I fixed that.
it's kind of misleading, isn't it?
Yes, you have to make many assumptions when you deal with the data and extrapolate the data from a chart like this, and not all of those have been defined or verified.
Also, and I just want, you still have those 2 exhibits up there? And I was looking at this. When we see here at Defense 18, what's the time period that they have here in their example on calculating that BAC?
The example is listed as a 180-pound man consuming 8 drinks in 4 hours.
So this is a chart that's taking into account 4 hours.
The chart does not take into account time. It's trying to help you assess the factor of time when using this chart. The chart itself assumes 0 amount of elimination, but in fact, elimination does happen from the time you begin consuming.
And there's another good point. When the defense counsel was asking you questions, he said, if you are, let's say, a 250-pound man and you have 1 drink, you'd be under 0.01. Is that correct?
I said between under 0.01 to maybe under a 0.02.
You did, and then defense counsel tried to get you to say under a 0.01.
Correct.
The chart actually doesn't support that, does it?
240 pounds is listed at 1 drink, 0.016. 240, a 240-pound male is listed at 1 drink, peak 0.016 grams per 100 milliliters.
Ma'am, based on the toxicology report, you can tell us the victim had a .012 blood alcohol level.
That's correct.
Can't tell us what he drank?
Objection, that's his characterization. It was a .12.
Oh, sorry, you're right. We're both getting it wrong. .12.
0.12.
Yeah, I put that 0 in the wrong part. He had 0.12, right?
The calculated blood alcohol concentration is 0.121 grams per 100 milliliters.
And can't tell us what he drank?
Correct.
Can't tell us how long he was drinking?
No, the only thing I can tell you is that ethanol particular, was consumed.
And anything else that we just talked about, other than what his BAC was found in his body, is really just a guess, isn't it?
The alcohol concentration is not a guess. That's a measured level.
No, not that. I'm saying other than the BAC, anything else. How many drinks, what he was drinking, whether or not he even liked it, that's all just a guess, right?
Correct.
All right, thank you. Nothing else.
Can we have evidence control on the projector device, please?
What are you showing now?
Just to clarify, the BAC in this case was 0.12. Is that correct?
If you slide the exhibit over, you can show the specimen associated,
Correct.
iliac blood, that's our identification number for that specimen, 881841. We identified ethanol at a concentration of 0.121 grams per 100 milliliter or grams per deciliter, those are the same units, in that sample. And then the vitreous concentration is identified below that.
Okay. So, as you said on cross, Ms. Schreiber, those charts and those calculations serve as a guide, right?
Correct.
So they kind of give an estimate of how much alcohol one would have to consume to be at a certain BAC with a given specified weight. Is that right?
And assumed specified parameters, yes, that's correct.
Those parameters kind of just give the public an understanding of what the average is. Is that fair to say?
No.
Okay, could you explain that?
The parameters, the assumptions that are made when using that chart are that the individual consumed under an empty stomach, that there was no disease states that affected that alcohol absorption or elimination, that no time is calculated within that concentration. And like I said, alcohol elimination begins at the time that alcohol is consumed. It doesn't take into account non-traditional drinks. It only has limited parameters based on the definition of drink that was given previously.
Okay, so you said the assumption is that alcohol elimination occurs once alcohol is consumed. Is that correct?
Yes.
So if someone was a 0.12 BAC a couple hours after they had consumed, wouldn't it be fair to say they were even higher than that BAC of 0.12?
Provided they're on the elimination side of the curve, yes, their alcohol level, their alcohol concentration would be higher at a previous point in time.
Okay. And what is the average elimination rate of alcohol per hour?
There are several published rates. Average is 0.015 grams per 100 milliliters per hour. But average ranges are somewhere between 0.01 and 0.025 grams per 100 milliliters per hour. That encompasses a larger portion of the population in order to cover any of those circumstances that I spoke of before.
Okay. And as somebody is of a higher weight, isn't it fair to say that the number of drinks that they have to reach a higher level of alcohol, more is required for that?
That's correct.
So if you're lighter, then if you have 4 drinks, compared to somebody that's much heavier than you, you're going to have a higher BAC, more it's in relation to them, most likely. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
So the number of drinks to reach a BAC, how would you say that is just in relation to weight, like in terms of the correlation there? Is it very strongly associated?
I don't understand your question.
Let me rephrase that. So if somebody was, let's say, half the weight of 250 pounds, let's say they're 125 pounds.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Sustained.
Okay, now you mentioned also this chart assumes certain kinds of drinks, such as, one drink equals either 12 ounces of 100 proof whiskey or 12 ounces of a light beer.
Once again, I think you misspoke. You said 12 ounces of 100 proof whiskey. 12 ounces of 100 proof whiskey, even if you're from Wisconsin, is a lot.
That is a lot, Judge. Okay, well, why don't we just back up and have you tell us what are some of the drinks that fall under the definition of one drink within this chart?
Again, one drink is defined as one 12-ounce light beer, 4 ounces of wine, or 1 ounce of 100 proof liqueur.
Okay, what about dark beer? Is that generally known to be of a higher concentration of alcohol?
Generally speaking, yes.
And to your knowledge, does beer come in greater servings than 12 ounces?
Yes, it does.
What are some of the other quantities of ounces of
Objection,
beer
Your Honor,
servings?
relevance as to whether or not there's
Hey,
pitching.
Counsel, it's irrelevant. We live in Wisconsin. Beer comes in bigger servings than 12 ounces, yes.
Okay.
16 ounces, 24 ounces, a big, huge boot. If you're at the Bavarian Inn, it comes in larger servings. That's in the common knowledge of the jury.
Okay,
Let's move on.
fine, moving on. So if somebody had a dark beer and they had 3 to 4 beers, of that, let me scratch that. So the 3 to 4 drinks that somebody can consume, the typical serving under this chart is assuming 12 ounces of a standard beer, and that under this chart you would need 7 or 8 drinks if you were 240 pounds or to reach 0.12. Is that correct?
That's correct. Again, not taking account for elimination or any of the other parameters that were spoken of previously.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further.
State.
I'm not going to get into all of that. There's just one thing I want to clarify. Defense counsel stated, well, if someone was at a 0.12 and several hours earlier had stopped drinking, that could cause them to be higher, right?
The concentration of ethanol could be higher than it was at the measured time, but not infinitely. At some point it would be lower because that number doesn't just forever increase in a retrospective fashion.
Also, if, as in this case, we're not talking about hours between someone leaving the bar and the autopsy. If someone is at a bar drinking, leaves, gets into a car, and within minutes gets out and is shot in the head, that BAC is pretty much where it would have been. Is that correct?
Where what would have been?
Where his BAC would have been at the time that he got shot and killed, correct?
Yes.
Okay. No. Thank you.
Great. All right, you can step down, ma'am. Thank you. Who's the defense next witness?
We are recalling Dr. Kelly.
Fine. Is he ready?
Yes.
Based on our conversations yesterday, I expect this to be brief.
Swear the testimony given in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Please be seated, state your full name, spelling first and last for the record.
Morning again, everybody. We're now back with the original
My name is
medical
Philip Kelly,
examiner.
Philipkelley.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. And thanks for coming back, Dr. Kelly. Just had a couple questions for you. Just wanted to clear some things up. Are you familiar with what's known as the hinge chart?
Objection, Your Honor. We've already taken testimony on this. This is cumulative.
Mr. Huber.
Use the mic, please.
Sorry. Let me get back. This is cumulative. We've already just gone through this.
Judge, I just want him to answer.
He can answer that question, yes. Can you rephrase it? I didn't hear it. Everybody needs to use the microphones, please.
Sir, are you familiar with the hinge chart?
I'm familiar with, I think what you're talking about is a hinge chart. I just know it as a blood alcohol concentration estimation chart.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's marked as Exhibit D18. Dr. Kelly, do you recognize this document?
Objection, Your Honor. We've just gone through this. We're literally just going through the same thing again with another witness.
Right, counsel, where are we going with this? Is this the exact same exhibit that was shown to the last witness?
Right, but it is, but Judge, he's saying that he's familiar with those things. I'm asking him to confirm if that comports with his knowledge of that.
What's the relevance? We've already gotten in everything.
Number one, this is automatically admissible under Wisconsin
I don't
law.
want to talk about admissibility. I think the objection was cumulative. If we just heard one witness expound on alcohol and BAC and all those things, why do we need this witness to do that?
I'm not going to have him go into that. I just want to be able to see if he recognizes the chart and show that.
Fine, he can answer if he recognizes the chart, then let's ask questions that are not cumulative or repetitive.
I do recognize the chart.
Okay. And is that consistent with what your knowledge of the blood alcohol chart in this state is?
I don't understand the question. The blood alcohol chart in this state.
Sorry, I will rephrase the question. You said you recognize the chart. Can you tell us what you recognize about it, doctor?
Well, the state of Wisconsin created this chart a long time ago to assist people in estimating what their estimated blood alcohol concentration would be based on how many drinks. I think the idea was that if you're out and you're drinking, you look up the chart for your sex, you look up your weight, you look at.
Well, this isn't good for the defense. They're recovering what the other witness just told.
All right, go ahead, counsel. Couple questions.
All right, now, Dr. Kelly, sorry for the interruption. Could you restart and just tell us what you were saying about the blood alcohol chart in this state?
The chart is just gives an estimate that you can use to estimate what your possible blood alcohol concentration would be based on how many drinks, how many standard drinks that you had.
And that chart doesn't assume any sort of elimination, is that correct?
The chart assumes a lot of things. It assumes you're on an empty stomach. It assumes that you're ingesting standard drinks. It assumes that you start eliminating. Actually, you start eliminating metabolizing alcohol right away. So it assumes all those things, and what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to subtract the amount of time since you began drinking and subtract that from the blood alcohol concentration in the chart to get an even more estimated blood alcohol concentration.
Okay. And showing you D18 here, could you tell us, not even factoring, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Okay, could you tell us, according to the chart, sir, not even assuming the subtraction you were talking about, a 250-pound male with a 0.12 BAC, approximately how many drinks would need to be consumed to reach that BAC?
I don't know if I can calculate that. This chart goes up to 240 pounds to begin with.
Okay, so let's just say 240 pounds then.
According to this chart, the estimate around 0.125 is 8. It looks like 8.
Okay, so are you specifically referring to right around here?
Yeah, somewhere. That's the number. And if you go up, I think it's 8.
And that is for 240 pounds, not 250 pounds.
That's correct.
Okay. And that also doesn't factor for any sort of elimination over a period of time.
That doesn't take into account time.
Okay. Now, Judge, at this time, I'd like to move D18 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, fine.
Okay, thank you.
Received.
Now, one last question for you, Dr. Kelly. So, last week you were telling us about, your role as a medical examiner here at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, and that you routinely perform autopsies. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And as part of your work in being a medical examiner, you're familiar with bodies of individuals that come in and are deceased. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So you're very well familiar, would it be fair to say, of death and the natural physiological process of death in the body?
Yes.
Would you be familiar with what happens to a body once? Well, let me just ask you to explain. So, how do you determine when a person has died?
Well, our investigators confirm death at scenes, and they do so in a number of ways. Certainly the lack of pulse, the lack of respirations, the lack of any response to painful stimulus, the lack of any reflexive response to touching the corneas, things like that.
So the medical definition for death, could you give us a little overview of that, or is it more of what you just told us?
Confirming death basically requires indicating that all of those natural responses are absent.
Okay, and the natural responses, just to sum up, you said is lack of pulse or lack of breathing. What else?
Any lack of any responses, any lack of response to pain, any lack of response to touching the corneas, those are all reflexes that are absent in a deceased person.
Okay. Now, if somebody has just been killed, is there something in relation to the person's body temperature? I mean, I guess let me rephrase. Once death occurs, how long does it take for the body to start losing temperature?
Objection on it, relevant.
It's relevant in this case, Judge. There was some testimony on it about this subject.
Overruled. You can answer, but again, let's move this along. We discussed these witnesses being short and succinct. You can answer.
Okay. The body temperature is a subjective interpretation of somebody at the scene or whatever. But after you die, basically you have no more blood pressure, so you're no longer moving warm blood to anywhere. The body surface, the skin surface, is one of the places that can lose temperature relatively quickly. So, having the body feeling cool to the surface is not uncommon relatively quickly. You can check other areas like in the armpits or in the groin area, and there may still be some warmth. But most of the time, the warmth at that point is going to be in the core of the body. You can think of this in terms of that's kind of the body's natural responses to it'll lose heat as soon as there's nothing generating heat or moving it to the surface of the skin.
Within a couple of minutes, though, would there be a significant loss of body temperature?
Within a couple of minutes, you would expect, assuming nothing else has happened prior to that, to shunt the blood away from the skin. You would expect there would still be some warmth to the surface of the body to touching their skin with your skin.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Cross.
Couple of minutes and a body could start going cold. Is that correct?
Yes.
Judge, that's objection. That's
Overruled. That's cross-examination, and that's exactly what the witness testified to. That's what he said, counsel.
Can you tell us how long it's going to pass?
No, it's going to be highly relative to the person, the circumstances. As I said, it's a subjective interpretation of the observer.
And you're saying subjective, so it also takes into account what that person is feeling when they put their hand on the person's body.
Correct. One person may feel warmth, another person may feel coolness.
And if someone's distraught, maybe that's factoring into it.
objection, Judge. What's the relevance of that?
Counsel, it's obviously relevant because in this case, I don't need to explain it. It's relevant based on the testimony of multiple people. Overruled.
Additionally, Doctor, you stated that, and I'm not going to belabor this much, but you're stating what's causing the temperature to go down is because blood is not getting basically to the body. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is just physiology. I mean, if as soon as you die, the metabolic furnaces of all the cells in your body shut down. Your body is no longer producing heat, and you're no longer pushing that heat throughout all the vessels of your blood of your body. That includes the skin surface. So you begin to lose heat just like every other object. Whether it's through radiation with the surface you're laying on, or the wind carrying away your heat. It's a simple concept of just losing heat.
And this may sound like a dumb question, but if a body is kind of like heading down the stairs, so you've got the top portion, or the legs are on the top of the stairs, and the head is kind of going down towards there with the blood rushing, kind of going towards the front of the body due to gravity. Is it possible then that the legs and maybe the butt might seem colder than their other areas of the body?
I don't know if I can answer that. All I can tell you is that once the blood pressure diminishes, and keep in mind this is something that can happen in living people. I mean, if you see somebody who's about to pass out and you touch their skin, we'll often note that they're cold and clammy, but they're not dead. Their body is shunting the blood to the core of the body to support the body, and if you happen to be bleeding, the body does the same thing, by the way. The skin is unimportant, so it's shunting the blood to the brain and the heart and the core of the body. So having somebody who's cool when they're about to pass out or when they're dying is not uncommon.
So really, what we've just talked about now for a few minutes is when somebody dies, you can't tell us how long it's going to be until their body starts to feel cool to the person that touches them.
No, actually, the temperature of the body is not a reliable indicator of the duration or the time of death.
Another thing, Doctor, the victim in this case was shot to the head, basically right above the face. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I believe you talked about that this was slightly upward, front to back, with no real left-right deviation.
That's correct.
Okay, so it's basically a straight-on shot to the victim's face.
Yes,
And it goes through his face into his brain, if I'm not correct.
that's right.
Okay. Is that the sort of wound that you would expect to cause someone to drop instantaneously?
Yes, it is.
Is this the sort of wound that would cause someone to die instantaneously? If you can even answer that.
I mean, defining instantaneously, I mean, it could be seconds. You might maintain a little bit of heart activity for seconds to a minute, minutes.
But when someone takes this wound and they go down, it's pretty much a fatal wound, isn't it?
Yes,
Someone takes this wound into the brain, they fall down. If you're talking 3-4 minutes afterwards, they're dead, right?
yes.
CPR is not bringing this person back.
Not in this case, no.
Holding your hand over the person's bloody head is not going to bring them back, is it?
No.
Nothing else, thank you.
Anything else?
Just a couple of follow-up questions. Doctor, now you're familiar with some of the natural physiological processes that occur in the body after death. Is it fair to say that?
Yes.
Can you tell us what rigor mortis is?
Objection on irrelevance.
Sustained.
Can you tell us what algor mortis is?
Objection on irrelevance.
Sustained.
As far as when a body comes in, or when a deceased person, that is, comes into the medical examiner's office, is the temperature of the internal body measured at that time?
No, it's not.
It's not. Okay.
Well, I should qualify that. There would be a measurement if there was a concern about hypothermia or hyperthermia. But in general, no, there's not.
Okay. Now, you said that there would be, there's some areas of the body where there's circulation, such as, I believe you said, was it armpit or groin? Those kind of areas retain temperature better in the body. Is that fair to say? After death, that is.
They're not necessarily, but those are areas which you might see some residual warmth. They're not open to the air. They're not losing heat. They're basically they're protected areas. So, and they're close to the core of the body. So you might feel some warmth in those areas.
So areas such as the pockets, those areas are, as you said, protected. Well, number one, they're near the core. Would that be fair to say? Like the groin area?
Well, closer to the core, yeah.
And they're also insulated by clothing?
Yes, that's possibly true as well.
Okay. And they're, I believe you also referred to, they're not at the outer extremities of the body?
Right, yes.
So they're not as open to the outside, elements or the air. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a normal or approximate rate at which temperature decreases in the body after death?
No, there's certainly been a lot of people who have looked into this, and there's nothing reliable that can allow you to accurately determine that time frame.
Okay, but hypothetically, if a body is sitting out in an open air in an environment, it would be fair to say that the body is going to, at some point over time, reach what the room temperature is.
Yes, at some point there should be basically reach the temperature of its surrounding environment.
Okay, well, it wouldn't get any colder than that, right?
Well, it'll reach the surrounding temperature. It won't get any colder than the surrounding temperature. No.
Okay. And you would agree that the month of September typically tends to be a mild month.
Where is this
Yeah,
going?
In some cases, yes. It's hard to answer. Yeah, but for the most part, September, you're moving into fall.
Okay, all right, thank you, nothing further.
State,
No, thank you.
you can step down, doctor. Thank you. Defense, next witness.
The defense calls Mr. Theodore Edgecomb. Your Honor, we would ask for a couple minutes, though, to prepare.
And we also have some legal issues to deal
Fine,
with.
we'll take a 10-minute break. I'll send the jury out. You guys can have some more coffee, but not too much, so we don't need extra breaks. We'll be back in 10 or 15 minutes. Everybody else is to remain seated and silent.
Those were horrible questions. I don't understand the point of the medical examiner, either theirs or recalling the state's witness. I mean, we know he got shot, we know he died, we know he had a blood alcohol level, so I don't.
All right, the jury's been excused. We're going to take a short 10-minute recess, then we can discuss. There's a couple of legal issues, then the defendant can take the stand. We're off the record.
Stacy, no, they're not stalling. They're dumb. I don't think they understand where they're going. That's the best I can tell you. I think they have this idea they think is what's going to help them, but it's clearly coming out to the rest of us as a bunch of just gobbledygook. Yeah, Azita, off the record means that the court reporter who's up front typing everything that's said during the trial is no longer required to do anything. And that's just because if nobody tells her that they're off the record, everything gets recorded. And then, for example, if I turn around and ask the other attorney, hey, did the Packers win? That's actually part of the record. So it's about making sure only the official proceedings are documented. Barb, I think so too. Remember, the prosecutor, it looks like he's been doing it for a while. He's in his mid to late 40s. He's been doing this probably for at least 15, 20 years. Theodore's going to be up there really for the first time. You're going up against somebody who's been doing this forever and it's your first time. You're probably not going to win. And even if you don't lose all the way, you're not going to look good. I might not get to meet Theodore because I have to leave in about a half hour. So if this doesn't get going soon, yeah. I cannot believe this has drug on this long so far. And actually, if you guys are kind of curious about something that got messed up or overlooked, I covered it in my Day 5 recap. It's very interesting regarding when the firearm examiner came up and declared what she thought was the murder weapon. Shannon, Green Bay, well, I'm not sure if you're from America or not. Green Bay they lost the football game over the weekend in the playoffs. And I think he's a Packers fan, so he's just frustrated. He was trying to make small talk and try to be funny, and most judges aren't funny. They either tell stories or tell really bad jokes. There's one judge I was in front of while we were waiting for trial to start. He was telling people about the murder case he first tried a year out of law school in 1968. So yeah, that was an interesting thing. Essence, no, I am not cutting the stream. I'm just going to turn off my camera and just let it keep running. So you guys will be able to watch it for as long as it goes. Andrina, he's not the same one from George Floyd. He looks similar, but he was involved in Kyle Rittenhouse. And honestly, a lot of these medical examiners and coroners all pretty much look like that. You know, like just like you have the idea of what a detective looks like. Yeah, all these doctors look the same after a while. Barb, it doesn't match. It's not the documents that were found that there's an issue with because we can't read those. The issue is they were harping on about the fact they found magazines for a Ruger semi automatic pistol in the house as evidence that Theodore ditched a gun. But then they turn around and have their other experts say, oh, well, this bullet came out of a Glock most likely. Well, those are two separate guns. Why was this evidence introduced if it conflicts with each other? So that was my issue. And like I said in the video, if the defense was on top of it and they were paying attention to the details, they would have called that out. And if they want to make the police look incompetent or sloppy or the prosecutor look sloppy, that's where you go. But they're too worried about a bunch of dumb fucking video cameras we don't know about and honestly, I don't think exist. Matthew, I don't know if they've properly prepped their witnesses. Um, I have a feeling they did a lot of this over video or Zoom. Even then, I think this is just this is just indicative of how they've handled it so far. These guys are not well prepared. I think a case this big is outside of their capabilities and wheelhouse. Um, had this been a lower level offense, sure, I think they could have handled it. But just a murder case is well outside what they can do, and it's starting to show. They don't prep very well. Um, yeah, it's this is a constant narrative for them throughout this case. I hope to God they've prepped Theodore somewhat, but I've got very big concerns they haven't at this point. As it's not that it was high profile, any any decent murder case is going to be put together this way, and the state is going to have a lot of people involved. So I don't think necessarily the profile is the issue. It's just at when you get to a murder, that's about as serious as it gets. You need to be on top of your game. Just kind of like if there's minor league baseball, yeah, you might let certain things fall to the wayside versus when you're in Game 7 of the World Series where you expect nothing but perfection. Gabby, these guys are retained. They're private attorneys. They're not public defenders. Also, you know, I do think these guys, especially Ivory Lamar, when you look at his website, he, I think, is doing this for the clicks. He's doing this for the high profile nature of it. I think he is using this as a vehicle for himself. And I don't necessarily know for a cause, but I do think he's using this to help himself gain notoriety, get on TV. I mean, now there's people all over the place saying his name. So even if this goes bad, I still think he comes out ahead at the end of the day. Well, we'll miss, but that's, part of doing things as an attorney is all about sales, and some attorneys will be flashy and dashy and some won't. So it really just depends. But that's that's a very common thing with attorneys. It's all about getting the sales. What happened with the George Floyd defendants? Um, right now they're in federal court, so there's no video, there's no recordings. Um, but their trial did start this week, so I probably start covering that a little bit once it gets going. But it's really hard to do that when all I can do is look at a news report and then tell you what the news report says. That doesn't really seem helpful to me, and I don't think that's very helpful to you because you guys can just read them. So, yeah, their trial started. Of the people, I still don't understand why these guys are being charged. Chauvin did it. That's enough. I mean, you've also ended up charging a guy who was a week out of the job. I don't think he knows at all what's going on, but yeah, I just think these other three guys shouldn't have been charged. But we'll see what happens and see what happens in their case. Jackie, I don't know what you mean by the significance of the bullet being one of a few sold. Yeah, Long Crime may give updates, but like I said, it's once again some reporter telling you what happened, and I don't know. I don't really find that a captivating reason to stick around and follow something. So you can just read a report later. As it's not necessarily that cameras are exposing secrets, but for a very long time, courts kind of felt like they were a sanctimonious place, that it was a hallowed area that was about the law, and it's very important. So, and I think judges and the courts kind of got wrapped up in that notion that, oh, we're so important, and that's why it took a long time for cameras to show up in court. But I do think that as people now who are late stage boomers and Gen Xers are becoming judges realize letting the community see what's going on is very important and very helpful. So, maybe federal court sometime in my lifetime, but probably not, until I'm 70 is probably going to allow cameras. Yep, almost 200 viewers. Thanks for coming by, guys. I appreciate it. Packers rule. I agree that they take an oath to serve and protect and serve people, and they failed. But I don't know if putting them on trial like this is the proper answer. The one guy who did definitely do it, I think, was rightfully prosecuted, but I'm always a little worried about how far people push the chain of liability. Jackie, no, I'm for in this case, no. Full metal jacket ammunition's pretty normal for use in a gun. I mean, that's pretty typical. That's standard ammunition that you can buy at the store. The ones that were on George Floyd, I think, a counter argument to that would be if Derek Chauvin wasn't on George Floyd's neck and they were still where they were, that wouldn't have hurt him. So I don't know, because you have to show they each contributed. Well, if they weren't where they were, would he still have died? And if you can prove that yes, then fine. But one of them clearly wasn't, and then another one was doing crowd control. So, like I said, not all of these guys should be in trouble, and I think everyone needs to be examined individually, and I don't think they were given that chance. Also, I'm not a Packers fan either. Go Browns. Shannon, I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm just aware of the three of them, and then Chauvin already pled out. Yes, the felony murder rule, Griff, does exist, but they're not being charged on that. They're being charged under federal civil rights deprivation, so it's an entirely different case theory. Adirondack Bear Cub? No. I mean, what? Why? I don't really get how they could have made this any worse. They're allowed to watch. I mean, they did nothing illegal. They did nothing provocative. I mean, literally, they're allowed to stand there and watch, and they're allowed to film. Photography is not a crime, so yeah. Well, stay. If you don't know it's a crime, I mean, at some point you have to know. Knowledge isn't an issue; it's a mens rea issue for many crimes. So you have to know you're committing that crime. For example, theft. I have to know that I'm not allowed to take this item, otherwise I'm not committing theft. So I think you need to be careful about. Well, if they don't know, it's still, even if they didn't know, they're still in trouble. Well, at some point, then we're all in trouble for crimes at that rate. Oh, Adirondack, yeah, I get the idea. Okay, they could have rushed in and helped, but think about it. I don't know. I mean, go rush into a group of cops that are trying to arrest somebody and let me know what happens. They're going to tackle you, probably kick your ass, tase you, pepper spray you, or, I mean, depending on how bad it gets, they might shoot you. So, no, I don't blame those people for not getting involved and trying to protect him. I mean, they knew it was going to happen. It was, and besides, when the other police show up, if they radio for backup, they're not going to, whose side are they going to take? The cop's side. So, rushing in like that, I think would have been very dangerous and irresponsible. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure we were still flashed up and ready to go. Yes, Kim Potter did know she was committing a crime, and that's where I think the jury instructions were improperly done. I think she's gonna have a retrial at some point. Oh, she's not getting probation. She's gonna go to prison. There's no doubt about that. I put money on it. Matthew, there's nothing they can do to make that witness credible. He was a horrible witness. But then again, though, horrible attorneys pick horrible witnesses who then they also use horrible tactics and trial strategy. So, no, that witness, they should have just written him off. There's nothing they can do to make him look better at this point. Griff, you're 100%. Without those cameras, we would never have known about this, except for a blurb in an article somewhere. Oh, I bet Theodore's sweating. This is going to be the performance of his life. There's not really an issue about him being hired by the defense. He's a witness they're calling. And I think he even stated he was hired by the defense to inspect what was going on. So it's not an issue about that not being up front. It's just the fact that he wasn't a very good... I mean, he's supposed to be the detective critiquing everything. And he basically came across as super, super lazy. Which is funny because the defense is claiming the police themselves were super, super lazy. I think Kim Potter's judge, she punted. She didn't make tough decisions.
Back in the record on
And
Edgecomb
she,
appearances
like I
remain
said,
the same.
she set that trial up to
The
get
jury's
redone.
not present. The defense is calling their client. We have to discuss, I think, two things, one of which we discussed, or actually both of which we discussed a bit yesterday off the record at the end of the day after I had discharged the jury for the day. The first one, I think, is under 90609, the question of impeachment by evidence of a prior conviction. Mr. Mott, I presume that was one of the two things you wanted to discuss, correct?
The issue is whether the answer should be 1 or 3.
Can you use the mic, please?
Yes.
We're talking about his prior convictions and what could be brought up when he testifies.
In terms of the prior convictions, we discussed yesterday, some of this was on the record. The defendant has apparently a CCW, carrying concealed weapon, from 5 or 6 years ago, based on 906.09 of the Wisconsin statutes, based on the factors and the criteria, not to mention common local practice and my practice, that obviously is going to be included. The question is whether the other two offenses are included or not in that calculation. The other two offenses being that the defendant pled guilty last week at the start of the trial to felony bail jumping and misdemeanor bail jumping. I'll hear from both sides, starting with the state, please. Again, I know I heard some of it yesterday, but go ahead briefly.
Your Honor, when we are talking about the number of convictions that apply, we are looking at 906.09. It states under sub 1, for purpose of attacking character for truthfulness, a witness may be asked whether the witness has ever been convicted of a crime and the number of such convictions. When sub 2 goes into the factors that the court can consider in terms of potentially determining its probative value substantially outweighs the danger of unfair prejudice, I don't think any of those would apply in this case. They're not old convictions. They're actually very new. There has been no rehabilitation. The gravity of the crime is disregarding court orders and having a weapon he shouldn't have had. The frequency, having a weapon he shouldn't have had. And considering the fact that his other conviction is a CCW, this would be, again, a weapons-related case. I would note that under State v. Trudeau, that's Trudeau, that is, if I'm not mistaken, 458 Northwest 2nd, 383. In that case, the court looked as to whether or not a conviction for which someone has pled guilty to but has not yet been sentenced would count under the statute. And in Trudeau, they determined that it did. Now,
That
I
wouldn't
want to
fly
be
in
very
Ohio.
clear, the facts are a little bit different in Trudeau because it was a different case to which he had pled guilty while going to trial on the armed robbery. But I think it still remains the same. This defendant has pled guilty to 2 counts. He is convicted of those 2 counts under the Trudeau reasoning. And when he testifies, he will have had and does stand previously convicted of 3 crimes. The legislature has let us know that individuals that have have convictions, that can be considered by a jury for purposes of credibility. He has 3 convictions. His number should be 3.
I read the Trudeau case, and counsel is correct that basically the situation there was the client had another case, had entered a plea, but wasn't sentenced, and that was the issue on appeal. And the court did say that that was countable, even though he hadn't been sentenced, given that he had pled, and there was a judgment of conviction. But that was a separate case. Here we have a different situation, and I think ultimately the court has the discretion to do the proper balancing under the factors. The court had also asked us to look at what other jurisdictions do, what the federal rules are on this, and there's a lot of variation between the states and the federal rules. I think, however, one major factor is whether this bears on, dishonesty is one factor that I think most courts consider. The age of it, obviously this is extremely recent, but it is of the same offense. And had he not pled, this wouldn't have been coming in at trial. Rather, he'd be presented with the bail jumping charges, and the jury would have to reach a conclusion on that, whether he was guilty or innocent of that charge as well. But then the answer would have clearly been 1. So, knowing that Mr. Edgecomb has already entered his plea ahead of time, and this wasn't part of any plea offer, I think the court should also consider the proper balancing.
They were stupid not to ask for this as part of their plea
If
offer.
the answer is 3, I think the defense should be allowed to just simply, in 1 or 2 questions, say, well, Mr. Edgecomb, 2 of those things were for, bail jumping charges, or 2 of those priors are for bail jumping charges that were charged along with this case, and without getting into further detail or opening the door as to what the previous priors. That's one way to deal with this. Or to do it cleaner, we would just say he still has 1 prior, Judge, and I think, there's a discretionary.
Mentioning the bail jumping in front of the jury would be, I thought, exactly what was trying to be avoided by him entering pleas to those 2 charges. So if you say the words bail jumping to the jury, that's not a positive. Let me hear from the state, and then I'll make my ruling.
I think the judge is going to go with defense.
The only reason I'm saying that is because the state has said they will cross-examine on that, and I don't know what the clear parameters of them being able to cross on the bail jumping is. I think from what I remember counsel saying, he would say, well, you weren't supposed to have a firearm, or you were restricted from having a firearm. The question is, does the inquiry stop there?
I wasn't going to ask anything more than that, and you actually already introduced that to the jury in your opening statement. So that's already in front of the jury. You told them that he had 2 court orders
That's
that
a good
prohibited him
point.
from having a firearm. I wasn't going to go into the fact that
Very
he
good point.
had
There
a
was an officer who also elicited that. I know you didn't ask the question.
We
but
didn't
he
ask the
said-
question, and we moved on immediately.
Mr. Ebner, under 906.09. Anything
No.
else?
I think it should be 3. If the defense wants to go ahead and introduce what they tried to keep out, they can do that. I guess that would be a tactical decision. I think they should have a conversation with the client before they do that, though.
I would hope it would be a tactical decision. All right, under 906.09. Generally, as the lawyers know, for the purpose of attacking, and I'm paraphrasing the statute, for the purpose of attacking the character for truthfulness, a witness may be asked whether the witness has ever been convicted of a crime or adjudicated delinquent and the number of convictions. Then under subsection 2, exclusion evidence of a conviction of a crime may be excluded if its probative value is substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice. Factors for the court to consider include, again I'm paraphrasing, the lapse of time since the conviction, the rehabilitation or pardon, if anything like that applies, the gravity of the crime, the involvement of dishonesty or false statement in the crime, frequency of convictions, and any other relevant factors. Going back briefly, can the state just put on the record the underlying basis for the felony bail jumping and the underlying basis, again, for the misdemeanor bail jumping, which the defendant did plead guilty to last week, please?
Yes, Your Honor, the misdemeanor bail jumping was because in Waukesha County case 20 CM 458, in which the defendant was out on bail for 6 misdemeanor counts, operating while intoxicated, causing injury, carrying a concealed weapon, disorderly conduct, resisting or obstructing an officer, operating a firearm while intoxicated, and causing injury while operating with a prohibited blood alcohol level in excess of 0.15. He was released on bail with the condition of bail that he not have any dangerous weapons or firearms. The defendant pled guilty to possessing the firearm on the date in question in violation of that misdemeanor bail from Waukesha. The defendant on the felony bail had been charged in Milwaukee County case 19.
He pled guilty on the Waukesha misdemeanor?
He pled guilty to the misdemeanor bail jumping. He hasn't pled guilty to the Waukesha case yet. That was pending. That's still pending. At one point they were going to do an NGI, then they withdrew it. I don't know what's going on out there. In Milwaukee County, 19 CF 5517, the defendant the defendant was charged with substantial battery, disorderly conduct, and actually 2 counts of disorderly conduct. The defendant was released on bail on that case when with a condition of bail that he not possess any firearms. The defendant pled guilty to that case for having the firearm in violation of that felony order at the time of this offense. We've talked about it before, but just so the record is clear, the victim in that case was Ruby Mizell, and she did not appear at court or did not cooperate, and the case was dismissed.
All right. To the question of has Mr. Edgecomb been convicted of a prior crime? Based on my evaluation of 906.09, looking at the lapse of time of the convictions, again, the one carrying concealed weapon is 5 or 6 years ago. The other 2 matters were last week. Under Trudeau, obviously the defendant has been convicted of those 2 matters. I asked the state specifically to make a record on the misdemeanor bail jumping because I considered, though I'm rejecting my thought, I considered that it might be de minimis enough to not count it. But it's a misdemeanor that was pending with 6 separate counts. As misdemeanors go, a more serious list of misdemeanors, I think looking at the appropriate balancing test, looking at all the factors under 906.09, the appropriate answer is 3. So, Mr. Edgecomb, if you're asked by your attorney or the state, have you ever been convicted of a crime, you're to answer yes. You understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
And the second
Theodore's
question
on the
will be
witness
how
stand
many
right now.
times, to which you're to answer 3. You understand?
Yes, Your Honor.
I
Fine.
disagree with
What
that
was the
ruling.
other issue again, gentlemen?
Well, there's actually 2 now, Your Honor, and I apologize. The next one was, the court had asked if I could send the case that I had sent to defense counsel over the weekend. It did involve whether or not an assertion made by the defense in a motion as to what the defendant, in fact, would testify to. If the defendant testifies contrary to their assertion as to what his testimony would be, whether or not that assertion by the defense would qualify as a statement
Well, let me jump in. We discussed some of this off the record yesterday.
Yes.
Should we not wait and see what the testimony is? It
Sure,
may-
that was the second issue.
Right.
And
Moot point. The other issue, I think, was that there was a question that the state asked. You put this on the record yesterday. We discussed it off the record. I basically made my ruling off the record and told the lawyers what to expect. But when the defendant was apparently allegedly picked up or stopped in Kentucky, he made some comment. The state can correct me. It's something along the lines of, "Oh, what happened in Milwaukee?" Is that correct?
He said what happened in Milwaukee. That's correct. When they identify themselves as Milwaukee police detectives and state that they would like to, that they're there to talk to him about what happened in Milwaukee, he stated what happened in Milwaukee.
And this was, correct me if I'm wrong, based on our conversations yesterday, the Milwaukee detectives come down to Kentucky. They, again, the state can correct me if I'm wrong, walk into, I presume, a room or an interrogation room or a seating area and say they're here to discuss what happened in Milwaukee. Can you just clarify for the record?
Yes, Your Honor. The detectives drive down to Kentucky. They go to meet with the defendant. They begin talking to him and asking him a number of questions to make certain that he understands what they're talking about. Like, is he on medication? Does he understand them? Does he speak English? Is he...
The basic pedigree background questions?
Yes, and the defendant says he doesn't even know who they are, and they say, we'll get to that. We just want to make sure you understand what we're saying. When the defendant indicates that he does understand what they're saying, the detective, I believe Kirkvold, states, well, we're City of Milwaukee police detectives, and we're here to speak to you about what happened in Milwaukee. The defendant then responds with what happened in Milwaukee.
The state wants to use that and cross on that, correct?
Correct.
Counsel for the defense, Mr. Ahmad.
Judge, we made our objection to that earlier, I believe, but again, that statement was prior to the Miranda warnings. I know what the state's position is regarding whether there's going to be any, whether they have any testimony on rebuttal, but I just think the point regarding consciousness of guilt has been made in this case. It's not disputed. This is just becoming cumulative evidence.
Well, hang on. There's been a lot of cumulative evidence. The video's been played, I think, 700 times by both sides. I've been encouraging both sides, starting yesterday, to move it along. But there's not been a lot of evidence of consciousness of guilt. I'm allowing the state to cross on that issue. Obviously, as I've ruled previously, consciousness of guilt is admissible in this case, as is the evidence, alleged evidence relative to flight. If there's any evidence related to concealment, consciousness of guilt is all relevant to this case. The defendant allegedly, basically the defense admitted this at their opening statement, fled the state, was on the run, or at least not in Milwaukee, for 6 or 7 months. The state can cross-examine on that, ask the defendant about that. Maybe there's an explanation, maybe there's not. Both sides can ask about it. I think that clarifies everything. I'm ready to bring the jury in.
The defense has just shown me for the first time 3 photos that they plan on introducing. They're photos of the defendant with his children. I don't believe that there's any relevance to them. I would ask the court to take a look at them and make a ruling.
Fine, hand them to my clerk, please. All right, I've been shown 3 photographs, one of what purports to be the defendant with a child at basically a T-ball game or T-ball situation, one with the defendant with another child, it may be his child, in sort of a swimming lesson type situation, and another that I don't know if this is a defendant or not because it's a back. It literally is it's shot from behind the defendant or behind the person who's standing with 2 children at some sort of rally or protest. Mr. Ahmad, how are those relevant?
Okay, so first, Judge, this basic background information, I think the defendant has a right to talk about his, generally speaking, his family, just some basic information about himself like a lot of witnesses have been doing. Number two, the state introduced two photos that don't show him in the most favorable light. They're mug shots where he's not really well groomed. And
well, first of all, counsel, the one photo that we discussed was literally on the screen for 2 seconds, and it was directly relevant to this case. Yes, you and or the state can ask a few basic background questions. Where do you live? Where'd you grow up? You know, I think it's apparent he's not been working for a while, but what's your occupation? Those kind of things. Candidly, Mr. Mott, never in my life have I seen photos like this shown to a witness on basic background questions.
Number three, Judge, part of his story that night is that he was planning on spending time that evening with his daughter, daddy-daughter date night. I'm sure the court's heard that phrase. So there's a photo there involving his daughter. And there's one more photo that would go to his state of mind around the time. The state has put in consciousness of guilt evidence. You know,
Hey
I
guys,
think we're
it's
allowed to rebut
11:30.
that
I
to
gotta
talk
go.
about
I
what
got
was
some
going
court hearings
on
this afternoon.
during the
I'm gonna
summer
leave
of
the stream
2020,
running, so
leading up to
I'll check
September
back in later.
22nd, 2020.
See you guys.
Regarding, and as the court
luck,
referred
Theodore.
to
You're
it, it was
gonna
a
need it.
picture of a protest. That protest was a BLM protest, and there's a lot of events that happened in the summer of 2020 that, from our client's point of view, subjectively, you know, he was in fear of what had occurred, a fear of the system, of police, things like that. And I think he should be allowed to talk about that. And that's what the relevance of that picture is. That's the third picture in the stack of three.
The picture doesn't even.
Right, the picture doesn't demonstrate any of that. It demonstrates what, again, purports to be, I don't even know if it is, but I'll assume for now that it's the defendant with his back to the camera with two children that are probably in the range of ages 3 and 5 or 3 and 6, somewhere in that age range, observing a march or protest or it looks like a bunch of bicyclists and walkers.
And there's a sign that says Black Lives Matter on it, Judge. He can obviously authenticate that that's him. I mean, he should be able to recognize what he looks like, even if it's from behind.
Understood, but what does the photo matter? He can testify. If that's what his mindset is to leaving, what you're trying to do is you're attempting to show pictures of his kids in an attempt to make the jury be prejudiced against convicting him. That's the whole point of this. We never showed any pictures of the victim's family. We never showed any pictures of the victim's wife with them. We showed one photo of the victim for purposes of identification. That's it. You want to show a picture of the defendant dressed nice? I don't care. But you start trying to put in pictures of his family, the whole purpose of that is to have a prejudicial effect. There is no other relevance.
That's absolutely correct. Mr. Mott, you know that's the reason, and you don't have to say it out loud, but of course that's the reason. The reason is to make the jury not want to convict him because he's a nice guy, because he worked with his kids, because he may have coached T-ball. That may all be correct, and I'll even allow you to ask questions about it. But the state's correct. For me to allow this, the state would then ask on rebuttal to now bring in photos of Mr. Clearman with his wife, or photos of Mr. Clearman with his child, or photos of Mr. Clearman at a baseball game or swimming with somebody. It's not relevant. The questions about these issues can be asked within some reasonable degree of relevance, but the photos are not appropriate. Never in my life have I allowed a photo in a situation like this. Never in any case. There's not a basis for it. I'm sustaining the objection. Let's bring the jury in. The defendant is on the stand. I will make a record that multiple times over the last week I have intentionally had witnesses sitting on the stand or ready to testify, meaning not walking up in front of the jury. Obviously, as we know, but it has clearly been kept away from the jury, the defendant is in custody. He's seated on the witness stand. He's in street clothes. He's in a suit. We'll proceed in the same fashion. I'm bringing the jury in. I'd like this examination to hopefully conclude this morning. That's an hour and a half total for the two of you, for both sides, I should say. But we'll bring the jury in. Everyone else can remain seated. all remain seated, please. All right, jury's back. Sir, if you can stand and raise your right hand, please.
You solemnly swear the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Please be seated, state your full name, spelling first and last. Please speak into the microphone.
Yes, Theodore Edgecomb. That's first name Theodore, last name is Edgecomb, as in boy.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Edgecomb.
Good morning.
Now, I just want to get a couple things out the way. Mr. Edgecomb, have you ever been convicted of a crime before?
Yes.
And how many times?
3 to my knowledge, yes.
Okay. Now, Mr. Edgecomb, how old are you?
32 years old.
And if you could tell the members of the jury about, just your family. Do you have any kids?
Yes, I have 5 children.
Okay. And if you could describe to the members of the jury just your family construct.
My children, they're my pride and joy. 2 sons, I have 3 daughters, and whom I love dearly. I have a special, unique bond with each one of them. I tell them everything. I don't try to keep anything from them. When I look at them, I see myself in them. They remind me of myself even at a younger age with, different things in which they do, their reactions to certain things, their humor, their mannerisms, even in how they look. At times, when I'm looking at them, it's like I'm looking in the mirror.
Mr. Edgecomb, are you engaged at all?
Yes.
And who are you engaged to?
Miss Ruby Mizell.
Okay. Now, Mr. Theodore Edgecomb, if you could explain to the members of the jury, where were you raised?
In Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Okay. And where did you reside on or about September 22nd of 2020?
During that time, I was in between places. At the time, though, that particular date, I was residing on Dowsman Street on the Lower East Side of Milwaukee.
Okay. Now, if you could tell the members of the jury about your education background.
Yes, I attended college. I have enough credits to, I need a few more credits in order to obtain my bachelor's degree.
Okay. And what was your field of study?
Psychology.
And what interested you about psychology?
Just the study of human behavior. I'm a people person, and just with that, just wanting to understand individuals more, just to, get more acclimated with them, and just understanding people overall, their uniqueness, different abilities that they have, what makes us different, what makes us the same, and yeah.
Okay. Now, Mr. Edgecomb, were you employed on or about September 22nd of 2020?
I think majority of America wasn't employed at that time. The country was pretty much shut down, and I was at home pretty much, and just looking to, like everyone else, get unemployment due to the fact that I wasn't employed at that time.
Okay, what did you do prior to the COVID situation?
I worked for SPX Transformers Solution in Waukesha, and I was an electrical product assembler. So I built transformers for the in which they were shipped around the world.
Okay. Now, were you involved in any type of volunteer activities of any kind?
Yes.
If you could explain to the members of the jury, what kind of activities were you involved in?
Well, first off, one in which I took pride in, I was a T-ball coach for my daughter and her team. They were called the Zimbos, and this is in the Beckham-Stapleton League, of Milwaukee. I took great pride in that. My daughter, she overexceeded in it. The team, they were great individuals, all of them unique. Yeah.
Okay. Were there any other activities outside of the T-ball league that you've done?
Yes, a few.
Okay. You want to tell the jury about those as well?
I assisted in basketball coaching too, in the league, and also too participated in mentoring, if you may. I have a nonprofit called RAP, Restoring Anointed Paths, in which I help youth just in life, just becoming of age from the age of 9 and up, just help them being better individuals in society, helping them even as far as training, if they have schoolwork, participating in different programs that will help enrich them. And a lot of these individuals come from impoverished situations. So, and that's why that was a part of why I studied psychology too, to also help individuals. And like I mentioned, these young men were in impoverished situations, the majority of them. So, and understanding their situations and, empathizing with them, that was a part of RAP and Restoring Anointed Paths.
Okay. Now, I want to transition a little bit, Mr. Edgecomb. I want to now talk about the summer of 2020.
Yes.
Do a couple things stand out to you about the summer of 2020?
Yes, a lot actually.
Okay. I want to first go into, do you recall experiencing any racial tensions that you experienced during that time frame?
During the summer of 2020?
Yes.
As far as for myself or just out in society?
Just generally in society.
Generally, yes. I know the George Floyd situation was pretty prevalent in society at that time. There were a lot of marches, protests, different things like that going on. And there was a lot of groups that were clashing against each other. And with that, it created a lot of divisiveness in the world, in which, a lot of people were harmed. A lot of people, it created a huge divisiveness in society, in America actually. It was different groups, like I said, that were going against each other. And this wasn't prevalent prior to this pandemic and, different issues as far as George Floyd that were going on. People were more brash and bold about what they were doing, and it was so out in the open. It was looking and seemingly like no one could pretty much stop this. It was like chaotic and madness.
And how did that make you feel? Did you ever attend or observe any of these protests or marches that you spoke of?
Yes, I actually attended a few, and when I did so, I brought my children. Upon them growing and becoming of age, I didn't keep too much from them. I taught them about history, Black history in particular, and how different individuals were treated. And also, too, with that, I told them both sides of how people need to come together more and not be so divided, because we're more alike than we are different. And with me teaching them that, it gave them the understanding of, it showed them and gave them the knowledge and understanding of, not to hate, to love individuals, to be caring, to be kind, and to have empathy, show humility, and, just be a genuine person overall.
Now, did any of these racial tensions, affect you in any way, as far as your state of mind, to any degree?
Yes. Racism it's a thing that affects me. I follow Black history is like a favorite of mine, a favorite subject of mine rather. Even past history, from slavery up until now, I've even suffered, being discriminated against from individuals in society, from individuals in whom I was close with. And with that, I never understood the basis of it and why, someone could literally hate another person a lot of the times without not even knowing them. And with this, it was, just like I said, from past histories, just understanding and knowing the dynamics of slavery and, just that whole ordeal and, just people, I just couldn't, I really, even now, I can't wrap my head around, why anyone would be racist.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, I want to now kind of transition to the city of Milwaukee, if you will. How safe do you feel about traveling, or what is your views as far as the safety of this city?
It seems like each year, the crime rate has risen. Even in a particular area in which I was staying during I was in between as far as in 2020, that particular area was considered a safe area. But individuals whom I encountered and even rode bikes with, they were like saying that the crime rate had even risen in that area, and it was known to be a particularly good area. But a couple of these individuals, like I mentioned, and whom I even rode bikes with, they didn't even feel safe riding bikes by themselves. So, we would travel in groups and even meet up in groups, from 3 to 5 people at a time, because they didn't feel safe. One particular guy, he told me, I was mugged, and they didn't get much, but just my wallet. But even in that instance, he didn't even feel safe riding by himself. So.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, have you ever been violently attacked or assaulted in your life?
Yes, I've been. There was an attempted robbery done on myself before.
Okay. And when was that, Mr. Edgecomb?
It was in 2018, I believe. Yes, 2018.
So roughly 2 years or so before the incident in question?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as a result of what you believe to be, a violent area, did you carry any weapons at any time during the year of 2020?
Yes, I carried a weapon, just for protection purposes. Never, with any intent to hurt, harm, or endanger anyone, though.
Okay, but Mr. Edgecomb, you're on a bicycle, right? Is that your main source of transportation?
Yes.
So,
at that time, yes.
So, Mr. Edgecomb, so you're telling this jury that you're driving a bicycle, but you feel the need to carry a firearm. Is that correct?
Only, I would say it wasn't all the time. Mainly, at nighttime when, more crimes can be more prevalent. It would mainly just, be at home, in my home just to protect my family and my children. Keep it there for protection.
Okay. So you're saying that you would generally carry it at night when you were driving the bike. Is that correct?
If I were out, yes. By myself, yes.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, at this time, I want to now direct your attention to September 22nd of 2020. Does anything stand out to you about that particular day?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to just kind of start from, earlier in that day. What was your thought process? What were your intentions? If you could explain to the members of the jury, what plans did you have for September 22nd?
Well, just to go back a little bit, that date in particular, I had all my children with me. I was in sort of a bliss, starting out that day. It was a joyous day. My two youngest children at the time, they were 1, and they were reaching milestones in their lives, as far as like just beginning potty training. So, everyone, my oldest daughter in particular, we would congratulate them. She was helping out. She's a nurturer at heart, and she was helping me with them, as they were reaching these different milestones. They were just beginning to walk. So I had all of them, like it was just a good day, good vibes, good energy. Like I said, I had all my children, and that's the best part of life to me, just being around family, having my children in particular.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that you were happy about a particular daughter, correct?
Yes.
What was that daughter's name?
I'm happy about all my children, but that date in particular, I had scheduled a daddy-daughter date night with my oldest daughter, just to catch up with her, just to, continue, just to bond even more. I hadn't spent that much time with her because I had 2 new children at that time, like prevalently new. They were 1 year old, but they needed more attention than the oldest 2, and they understood that. So especially with my oldest daughter in particular, like I said, she's a nurturer. She's like, has this momminess about her, and where she would help us. Even at times, me and her mother, she would, soothe us and comfort us or help us in different times of, if we're, maybe distraught or, if we're, handling adult situations, she would come to us and comfort us, and it would throw us off, like, take us aback a bit, because it's like, she's so young, but she's mature in heart and in her nature about herself.
Okay. Now, just for, the members of the jury, can you tell us the name of the daughter that you were having daddy-daughter date night with?
Yes.
Okay, what is her name?
Excuse me, sorry. Tyler Grace.
Mr. Edgecomb, what did you have planned for Tyler Grace on September 22nd of 2020?
I had daddy-daughter date night scheduled and planned with her, and which I still owe her. My apologies. I had daddy-daughter date night scheduled with her, in which I just wanted to just connect with her, even more, just bond with her, see where she was, see where she was as far as like, if she had any expectations for me, as far as, being her father. Thank you. See, if she had any expectations for me, being her father, and just letting her know, goals and expectations that I wanted for her, as far as her being my princess. And just also showing her my appreciation as far as always listening to me. Listening to me, doing good in school. Helping out her siblings, and helping out her siblings and just being great overall. Yeah.
So Mr. Edgecomb, I want to. Now, what was the specific plan? So you have a daddy-daughter date night. Where were you planning to go? What were you planning to do? If you could explain that to the members of the jury.
The plan at that time was just to get our favorite meal and just for us to, just bond, connect with each other, and just watch a movie and, just have one-on-one time instead of everyone, just being collectively. And everyone in the house knew too. We're just gonna be one-on-one time and, for us to just bond with one another.
So what was her favorite meal?
She loved sushi. And Dynamite is a restaurant in which we would frequent. And so, I asked her though in particular, what would she like, for this date? And she told me, hey, could you give me sushi, Dad? Like, sure, princess.
So did you ever, make any effort to go to Dynamite on the evening of September 22nd of 2020?
Yes, I actually did. I went there. I ordered the food for the date night. I actually waited outside the restaurant because during this time, we had, how they had it set up, we had to order from a side door because it was, COVID was going on. We're in the middle of a pandemic, so everyone's outside with their mask on. I paid for the food, and I kind of engaged in conversation with some individuals outside the restaurant. There was this one person in particular. There was this one person in particular in which, everyone kind of sparked the conversation around because during that time, like masks were like everyone like had a normal mask, and this person's mask stood out at that particular time, and so everyone kind of made conversation and like humorous remarks about it at this time because it had like a face on it, and at that time no one really brandished unique sort of mask at that time because everything was still pretty much new.
Okay. So you mentioned that you placed the order, correct?
Yes.
You remember what you ordered that evening?
Chicken satay. It's chicken on a stick, some sushi for my daughter, and then, if I'm not mistaken, it was like Hawaiian fried rice.
Okay. And did you pay for that order, Mr. Edgecomb?
Yes.
Okay. And you indicated that you were waiting outside, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you do next?
As I was waiting, I'm like, I'll kill some time. I'm gonna head to Frozone and get some frozen yogurt. I had heard about this place, but I'd never been before. A lot of people and online were like making this craze about this frozen yogurt. I hadn't heard about it, or I hadn't had it yet. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna see what this place is about. So I'm gonna head there, try to get some frozen yogurt.
Okay. All right. Now, were you armed on the night of September 22nd, 2020?
Yes.
Okay. And whose firearm were you in possession of on that evening?
Ruby Mizell's.
Okay. Is that your fiance?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what made you decide to carry it on that specific night?
It was nighttime. It was the weekend too, And crimes are more prevalent, like on the weekend. It's a lot more people out. Also, too, I know during this pandemic, it was a lot of racial tensions, a lot of just tensions, period. And like I mentioned, like the crime rate was relatively high during that time.
Okay. Now, when you carry this firearm, do you normally carry it fully loaded?
Yes.
And how many bullets would you typically have in that firearm when you carry it?
The magazine held 17.
So on the evening of September 22nd of 2020, did you have 17 bullets in that firearm?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned, now I'm going to mess up this name, I think you called it Froyo or Froyo?
Frozone.
Frozone, okay. Now, what kind of place is Frozone?
I never made it to Frozone. I never had it even still yet.
Okay.
But it's a frozen yogurt place.
So was that what you were intending for dessert with you and your daughter that night?
Yes. It was like a spontaneous, spare of the moment type ordeal. It wasn't even part of the plan. I just thought of it as I was waiting, as I was waiting, I'm like, I'd try this place. I heard about it, but yeah, it was just a spontaneous thought.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, is there a reason why you didn't make it to Frozone on September 22nd of 2020?
Yes, I just aborted the mission altogether as far as going there, because I'm like, I didn't know what I was up against. Like if there were containers in which the frozen yogurt came in, if it was big, if it was small, and I knew what I was up against as far as purchasing the dynamite. I knew what kind of containers, that consisted of, and I knew how much, I would be able to carry as far as with that. But I just aborted the mission altogether because I'm like, I'm not going to be able to carry this plus the dynamite as well. So I just aborted that altogether.
Okay. And what happened next?
So as I'm traveling eastbound on Brady, the traffic, it died down at this moment. I'm on the south side of Brady at this point. So as I abort the mission, cross over to the north side of Brady, and I'm headed westbound at this point.
Okay. And what happens at this point? Now you're going, is it eastbound on Brady?
I'm actually headed west now at this point because I aborted the mission. I'm headed westbound because I aborted the mission as far as just going to grab the frozen yogurt.
Okay.
So I diverted from that plan altogether.
Okay. So now you're going westbound on Brady Street, correct?
Yes.
And if you could tell the members of the jury what happens next.
So I'm traveling westbound on Brady, and I go maybe, I say about 5 feet, and all of a sudden I hear this horn blowing, and I see this car heading towards me, and I'm thinking that it's this, the vehicle that's headed towards me, that's blowing that horn at me. So I'm thrown off because I brace for impact, seeing this car headed towards me. So as I brace for impact, I'm learning that it isn't the car that's headed towards me that's blowing their horn loudly. It's them, it's the car that it was headed east, and this vehicle almost had a head-on collision with them. So as that vehicle swerves out from having a head-on collision, it's headed towards me, and it's traveling westbound on Brady, but it's in the eastbound lane, and it swerves over from having a head-on collision, and they're headed towards me. So I brace for impact. As I brace for impact, the vehicle just clips me, hits my pedal, hits my leg, and then also hits the handlebar, knocks me onto a parked car. As that, thinking about that, as that happens, I've been hit before. A few years back in Florida. I was left in the middle of the street. My bike was mangled, severely injured. The police never never found out who the person was who did it, and they never found the vehicle. So all that resonated with me. And as I was hit, a gentleman yelled out the window, excuse my language, he says the N-word and, you know, get the F out of the street. He says it boisterously and boldly, you know, and in such insulting way that I couldn't fathom why this was even said to me. So when that was done, he says, you know, he says, as he says.
You can say what he said, Mr. Edgecomb.
Damn, nigga, you can't drive, get the fuck out of the road. And there was an individual on the sidewalk who heard this and seen me get hit. And they're like, whoa, you know, the nerve of that guy. And they asked me if I was okay. I said, yeah, I'm all right. Who's he speaking to? Why is he talking like that? I guess he's talking to me.
Mr. Edgecomb, how did that make you feel?
I was infuriated. I can't lie. It brought back the trauma of when I was hit before. And that's all I could think about because I was left hurt in the middle of the street before. And I'm like, what if these individuals would have just, I could have been killed. You know, what if these individuals would have just killed me then? Then they insulted me. So it was like they had no remorse for what they had just done. I had an insult on top of, you know, injury, and I didn't understand it. In my mind, I'm like, maybe these people are drunk, you know, or something, and, you know, that's the only reason I could think of a person throwing out an insult. And at that time, I didn't, you know, I was just trying to put it together as far as like, you know, why would someone do that? Or why would they, you know, be that bold in taking those actions?
So you're infuriated, correct, Mr. Edgecomb?
Yes.
And what did you do next?
I proceeded west on Brady. I proceeded towards them. You know, like I said before, the vehicle that hit me years prior to this date, to that date in particular, that trauma resonated with me. So I'm like, I can't let them get away. I'm able to, you know, catch up to this individual at this point in time. And plus, I couldn't make out the vehicle directly because as they were headed towards me, all I seen was their headlights. So it was like blinding me. And I just braced for impact. So upon them, like I said, I wasn't able to see the vehicle directly until they were headed off, and he yelled out the window, and because I was bracing for impact.
Okay. And you mentioned that you tried to catch up with the vehicle, correct?
Yes.
Did you ever catch up with that vehicle on that evening?
Yes.
And what did you do once you caught up with that vehicle?
When I came up to the passenger window, I actually was, you know, riding kind of fast, and you know, as I gathered myself, riding pretty fast, you know, headed to them. Came up to the passenger window and just asked him, "Hey, you know, were you guys talking to me?" And he said, "Yes, nigga." And I punched him.
At this time, I want to now show what has been marked as State 35.
Is it on?
Evidence control.
go ahead and play, counsel.
They're playing from the beginning, Your Honor.
Okay, I want to stop right here, please, before we get going on it. Now, Mr. Edgecomb, do you recognize this to be the Brady area which you were on September 22nd of 2020?
Yes.
Okay. Counsel, you can play, please. I want to stop right here, please, counsel. Mr. Edgecomb, do you recognize this vehicle?
Yes.
What do you recognize that vehicle to be?
The vehicle that hit me and that also chased me down.
Okay. All right, Mr. Attorney Ahmad, if you continue, please.
We're resuming at 104.
I want to stop right here, please.
Stop at 116.
Do you recognize this individual right here, Mr. Edgecomb?
It's not that clear to me.
Okay. Let's play it a little bit closer. Go a couple more seconds. Okay, stop right there. Mr. Edgecomb, do you recognize this person now?
Yes.
And who is that?
It is me.
Okay. Continue, please.
Playing at 120.
You can stop right here, please. Now, is this at the point where you've indicated there was a conversation between you and the individuals in this vehicle?
Yes. As I approached him, he appeared flushed red in his face, and it kind of confirmed, like, you know, what I was thinking, like, yeah, this guy has to be intoxicated, you know, as far as his boisterous tone, their demeanor, and then they didn't even have any remorse for hitting me at that point. You know, he insulted me again, you know, called me a nigger again, and so.
Now, let's continue at this point, counsel.
Where are we playing, counsel? Make a record, please.
That was at 125 we began. And now it's at 127. Let's go back a couple seconds. Playing at 125.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to stop right there.
Stopping at 129.
So, is that the punch that you just described that you know, rendered on the individual in this vehicle?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, what are you doing now?
I'm getting away from the situation altogether. I don't want any more to do with this. I'm focused on getting back home to continue on my daddy-daughter date night, get back home to my children safely.
All right. And if you continue, counsel.
Playing at 129.
And I want to stop right there.
Stopping at 133.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, did you observe any actions by any individuals in that vehicle?
Yes. Upon my approach, at that particular time in the video, I heard the door open. I looked back, and during this time, I'm like, oh, this guy's trying to get out and get me or something. He's trying to give chase. So that's, what made me even, get away from them altogether even more.
Okay. You can take plan. And, for the record, I think that concludes any relevant acts on this particular exhibit.
We stopped at 145.
Fine.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, now you said that you were riding off at this point, right?
Yes.
All right, and you indicated your state of mind at this point, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what were you thinking at the time that you left at this time?
I just wanted to be done with this altercation altogether, be done with it. I had no more business with them, like no business at all with them. And I just was focused at this point just to, get away safely, make it back home safely. I didn't even want to be in that altercation. I was focusing on my daddy-daughter date night. I just wanted to get back home to my children.
Well, Mr. Edgecomb, you punched the guy, didn't you?
Yes, I take responsibility for that. If I would have known then what I know now, I wouldn't have punched the guy. I would have just accepted being hit and called a nigger and just not even approached him.
So, where are you going at this time now, Mr. Edgecomb?
At this time, I'm on the Holden Street Bridge, and I'm on the incline, headed up the bridge. The bridge is an incline, so I'm headed up the bridge at this point.
Okay. At this time, I want to now show what has been marked as Defense 25. All right, we're now showing what has been marked as Defense 25, the clarified Zoom sequence video. Now, Mr. Edgecomb, at this time, do you recognize the individual that's behind the Reinhardt vehicle?
Yes.
Who do you recognize that individual to be?
It's me.
Okay. Now, what intersection are you approaching at this point?
That's Holden and Brady.
Okay. Counsel, you can continue.
Wait a minute, 2 seconds. But, actually, we'll go by the timestamp, Your Honor. In the bottom right, it shows 0.0.
And what exhibit is it again?
This is exhibit D25.
Fine.
Okay. You recognize this individual to be you, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, I want to stop right here.
Stopping at 3.37.
Now, you just took a right turn, correct?
Yes.
Is there a reason why you changed direction at this point?
I wanted to evade the situation altogether. Plus, I knew I had food that I was waiting on, so I would just go around the block and, come back up to the restaurant. But I was getting away from this situation in which I just ensued. And plus, I heard the door open, as I look back. So, I'm like, I hope, I'm in my mind, I'm like, I hope this guy isn't getting out to try to get me or something.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, on this video, are you standing up on the bike at this point?
Yes.
And can you explain to the members of the jury why are you standing up on the bike?
On that bridge, there's an incline. So, just to give myself a little bit more power. And plus, I'm trying to get away. I'm trying to get away from this situation, get away from them. These individuals in whom just had hit me. And, we had an altercation in which they had no remorse for. So I just wanted to, just get away as quick as I can from these individuals.
Counsel, you continue.
Claim where we left off, 3.37.
I want to stop right here. Now, Mr. Edgecomb, I see, where are you located at on this part of the road at this time?
At the bottom of the hill in the bike lane.
Do you normally travel in a bike lane, Mr. Edgecomb?
Yes.
If you could continue going forward.
Playing at 4.458.
I want to stop right here. Now, do you recognize that vehicle that just turned the corner, Mr. Edgecomb?
Yes.
At the time, what did you recognize this vehicle to be?
The vehicle that had hit me previously and that I pulled up to the passenger side of.
All right. And did you observe anything prior to this vehicle making a right turn?
Yes. The loud roaring of their motor, tires screeching. All I could hear was vroom. Like these individuals were chasing me down. They were trying to hit me. I knew this deliberately now at this point. I became, fear, came over me, as I heard that. Ahmaud Arbery resonated in my mind because I'm like, these people are hunting me down now at this point. Now they're becoming more bold with what they're trying to do to me. So as far as like hunting me down, and even if, like I said, they didn't show any remorse then for hitting me, now I know, even if they didn't know that they had hit me, now I know that they're deliberately and intently trying to hit me now.
Counsel, if you could continue playing the video at this point.
Judge, just for the record, the timestamp is no longer viewable in this Zoom sequence, so I'm going to refer to the player then, which shows 16 seconds.
Fine.
Playing at 16.
I want to stop right there. Now, Mr. Edgecomb, you just told the jury you were in a bike lane, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, are you in a bike lane at this specific frame of the video?
No.
Can you explain to the members of the jury why did you go from being in a bike lane to now being on what appears to be a sidewalk at this point?
I did that because I was escaping from being hit. As I got on the sidewalk, I was fearful, in fear of my life. I knew that these individuals were not, that they were deliberately trying to hit me. I accept responsibility, for punching Mr. Clearman. I was infuriated for that. Shouldn't have happened. As they were chasing me down, though, I became in fear of my life. I never felt that, amount of fear ever. And so I just wanted to just get away from them altogether. Just proceeding to some way, somehow, just get away from them.
So, Mr. Edgecomb, at this particular part of the video, you're saying you're trying to get away, correct?
Yes.
What options are you considering at this very moment?
At that very moment, my options were pretty much limited. I'm just focusing on, just getting away. Not really thinking too much, but, just seeing as to where I can go, seeing, how I can get away from these individuals. As I get on the curb, the reason I got on the curb is because I seen them heading towards me. And I'm thinking if I get on the sidewalk, they'll at least tear up their vehicle before they hit me. So that was my reasoning as to, you know, jumping on the sidewalk in that instant, because they were headed directly towards me. They were so close, in fact, that I could feel the heat of the engine on my backside. And I just knew, I thought I knew I was gonna be killed. That was what was resonating in me. I was in fear, I was in shock, so I'm still just trying to get away from them.
Counsel, if you can play the video starting at this point.
Starting at 19 seconds.
I want to stop right there. Now, it's a little bit grainy here. We can go back a couple seconds.
It stopped at 24. I'm going back to...
Okay, right there is pretty good. So, Mr. Edgecomb, at the time that this frame is in the video, what did you observe? What were you aware of? What was your state of mind at this time?
The whole time I was in fear. I see the opening, open landing. I'm like, I gotta get down this stair. I gotta get down these stairs and, you know, get away from these individuals. And as I see the landing and opening, I'm like, I don't think that they'll drive up on this sidewalk and driving here. You know, they can't be that bold. I know for sure, like, they're gonna tear up their vehicle trying to get to me. So I was, you know, in the mind frame of just trying to get away from them altogether.
Now, at this time, are you aware that there's somebody behind you at this point?
At that particular time, no.
Now, if we could continue playing at this point. All right, stop right there, please.
Stopping at 25 seconds.
So, what did we just see, Mr. Edgecomb?
Objection, Your Honor. As to what he saw, fine, but asking him to see what we saw in the video.
No, okay.
What did he see or what did he observe is fine.
That's fine.
What did you see or observe, Mr. Edgecomb?
I heard someone yelling out at this point, "I'm gonna kill you, nigger. I'm gonna kill you, nigger."
Now, just to be clear, at this point, you have now turned right into a particular area, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, what options were you considering after you took that right into this area? Can you describe that area that you turned into?
Yes, it was a landing stairwell. I was considering jumping over the banister. When I looked over, it was too far of a jump. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna make that. My first option, though, was to go down the stairwell with my bike to just get away from him altogether. As I'm hearing, "I'm gonna kill you, nigger, I'm gonna kill you, nigger," I can't make it down the stairwell in time because I hear the voice getting louder and louder. So I'm like, where is this coming from? And I'm like, I didn't want to turn my back, to a threat either, because I knew that these individuals had just tried to hit me. So I'm hearing this voice, getting louder and louder, as I get off my bike and before I proceed to go down the stairwell.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, can you describe the size of this stairwell? Is it a big stairwell? Is it small? How many feet would you estimate this stairwell to be that you're currently in at this moment?
It's a small box, probably, I don't think two people could fit in that stairwell. Like, it's, in feet, I would say like, maybe like 4 or 5 feet, like across.
Would you consider it comparable to the witness box that you're in right now?
Yes, that's a pretty accurate, almost, yeah, it's a pretty accurate measure. It's almost precise.
So, you're in this box, I mean, you're in the stairwell at this time, and you say that you're hearing something now. You're in the stairwell now, you're hearing something, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What are you hearing?
I'm gonna kill you, nigger. I'm gonna kill you, nigger.
Can we continue playing the video at this point?
Playing at 25 seconds.
Stop, please.
I'm stopping at 29.
Now, you indicated that a voice got louder and louder. Is that right?
Yes, it was louder. It was boisterous. It seemed like it was coming closer and closer.
Okay. Now, I know it's a bit grainy at this frame, but did you hear anything coming from this vehicle that is parked with their flashes on at this point?
I seen the vehicle pull up, and as I seen them pull up, I looked at the vehicle, and I didn't see. As the vehicle pulled up, it was probably like a split second. The gentleman came around the corner, and he met me right head on. So he startled me, and I thought he was in the vehicle. I didn't even know that he was, chasing me, he was chasing me at this point.
Okay. And you said that you appeared startled, correct?
Yes.
And how did you react to being startled by the gentleman that was approaching you at this point?
Upon him startling me and coming around that corner, I put my hand up and I told him, "Hey, stop, don't come closer." He told me, "I'm gonna kill you now, nigga." And upon him doing that, I heard Miss Clearman yell out, he's got a gun. And yeah.
So just to be clear, at the time that you put your hand out saying, "Stop, don't come any closer," did you have a weapon brandished at this point?
Yes, I had my firearm out. It was at waist level.
Okay.
I didn't have it like up. I just had it, down. It was drawn, but it wasn't like pointed.
Okay, can you describe what you mean at waist level? I mean, as you sit there.
Yes, it was just down in my side. I had just drawn it. I had just taken it out of a holster, and it was just still at my waist.
Okay. Now, at any time, did you ever take this firearm and extend your whole arm toward the individual that was coming across to you?
No. In fact, I kept it at waist level. I just kept it at waist level.
And what was your intent? You're brandishing a firearm at a gentleman that's coming towards you. What was your intent at this time?
I didn't have any intent. This gentleman actually took one large step and lunged toward me like he was going to tackle me. And I took a step back. And as I stepped back, it was the reaction from that, the firearm just went off. And with him lunging towards me, I didn't know if he was going after the firearm, if he was coming after me, or what. But I know from his words and his actions, his boisterous tone, he told me, "I'm gonna kill you now." So with that, I didn't have no reason to doubt this man. His actions, his demeanor, his tone, with them just previously hitting me, with the second incident upon me, punching him, he told me, he didn't have any remorse for hitting me the first time.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, did you ever notice the gentleman getting any type of stance or position at the time he faced you in that stairwell?
Yes. As he was in the stance, before he got in the stance, I observed two other possible threats. It was a vehicle that came up behind them. I'm thinking that these individuals were with them, that they were all trailing each other in caravan style, that these individuals were with them. So I could hear, noise. I could hear him, I heard him yelling, but I could also hear other noise behind them. So I'm thinking, you know, all these individuals are together. They're possibly going to get out the car, either shoot me, also join them, you know, in trying to attack me, cause harm or danger to me as well.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, is the vehicle that we see in this frame, is this the second vehicle that you believed or perceived was a threat that you just testified to?
Yes.
All right. And you didn't observe anybody get out that vehicle at any point, correct?
I was fixated on the direct threat that was in front of me because I just perceived them at this point to be threats. The direct threat was right in front of me, and he brandished, you know, he raised his hands, drawn up from his midsection, so it appeared that he had an object in his hand. And at this point, I couldn't tell what the object was because I wasn't fixated on it. I was assessing, you know, different things at this time. 2 possible threats from the vehicle, one that was in front of me, in which I, you know, first, you know, tried to escape forward into, and yeah, and this other threat that was behind that vehicle, possibly in that car.
So, Mr. Edgecomb, you're testifying that you perceived something to be in the gentleman's hand as he was in a boxer stance. Is that your testimony?
Yes.
And you're saying that you couldn't tell what that object was?
No, I couldn't at all. And as he was in the stance, he lunged right towards me, so I couldn't make it out what it was or what it could possibly be at that point. It all happened so quickly. And like I said, I was observing the other possible threats too that were in the vicinity. He was just a direct, imminent threat. The other 2, I was, you know, going back and forth, so I couldn't just fixate on what the object was. As he was in the stance, you know, you could see him holding something, but I couldn't see exactly what it was. He just took his lunge and...
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, what would you say the time frame was from the time that you see the gentleman get into a boxer stance with what you perceive to be an object to the time frame when he's lunging at you? How long did that take?
It was less than a half a second. It was just all instant. Even upon when he came around the corner and seeing the vehicle in front of me, it's like they all met. It was like I was met with all of this at the same time, because I still, as the vehicle pulled up, I thought he was in the vehicle. So once I seen him outside the vehicle, I didn't even know he got out the vehicle.
The video play at this point, please.
Playing at 29 seconds.
I want to stop right here. Mr. Edgecomb, is this where the gentleman got in the boxer stance? Was this the general vicinity of what you described?
Yes, that's also where he, you know, took the lunge at me like he was going to tackle me or go for my weapon at this point.
And you indicated in your testimony that there was a big step that he took, correct? Is this the big step that you're talking about in this frame right here?
Yes.
Where was your gun at this particular time?
I still had it at waist level drawn, and when he did take that large step towards me, it was just a reaction, and the gun just went off, and his head was perceived like in the downward, like he was gonna like tackle me or spear me, or like I said, even going for the weapon. But it seemed as though either he wanted to harm me at, you know, he wanted to cause harm or go for my weapon at that point.
Now, counsel, if you could play the video from this point.
Playing at 32 seconds.
Go ahead and continue. Stop right there. Is that the lunge that you're described to the members of the jury?
Yes, as that was done, though, I took a step back, and that's when the gun went off.
At this point, continue playing at this point.
Playing at 41 seconds.
Okay, stop right there. Now, did we just see you kind of take a step back and kind of back up?
Yes.
Okay. Continue playing at this point, please.
Playing at 47 seconds.
All right. All right, we can stop here.
Stopping at 101.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, immediately after this, altercation that you just had in this stairwell, how did you feel after this gunshot went off?
I was in shock. I couldn't believe it. Immediately, right, during that shock, I still, I look back, I assessed the other threats too, because I, had, just known, first it was this vehicle that was trying to hit me, so I didn't know, like, if the individual in this vehicle, would shoot out at me from the vehicle, if they had gotten out, or if the other people were actually behind Mr. Clearman at this point, and if they were coming towards me. So, but yeah, I was just in total shock.
What did you do next?
Next, I assessed, to see if I could get down the stairwell safely, and I was able to, because the imminent threat was, there was no direct imminent threat anymore, and the other threats that I perceived to be like they weren't coming directly at me, so I knew then, I can get away safely, make it back home to my children.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, you didn't stay on the scene, though. You grabbed the bike, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And your testimony is that you ran down the stairs at this point?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, did you feel like your actions were justified in this instance?
In that instant, I was in total shock. I really, I was just in total shock at, everything that had just taken place.
Do you feel like you were defending yourself at this moment?
Yes. I definitely was defending myself from being harmed. I was just previously harmed. I was hit off my bike, chased down. So, at this, individual lunging towards me.
Well, Mr. Edgecomb, if you felt like you were defending yourself, why did you feel the need to run at this point?
Oh, I had, a white man had just been shot, and I was just getting, chased down by them. I was still just, in shock. I couldn't believe the whole situation altogether. I ran because I didn't think anyone would believe, anything in as far as what had just taken place. And plus, I still was in fear, so I just wanted to get away from the dangers altogether. I didn't know if there were, if, like I said, these individuals were still chasing after me or gonna still be chasing after me.
Okay, so at some point or another on September 22nd, where did you go immediately after this incident?
Right after this incident, I headed back home, where I was staying at the time, on Dowsman. Yeah.
And did you feel safe when you made it home?
I didn't. I was still fearful. I left there. I was frightened. I kissed my children. Everyone was kind of, puzzled, by my actions, because, it was, hey, where's the food, daddy, daughter date night? I just gathered a few things and left. My mindset, at this point, I gotta, get away, and, figure out this whole thing that just had transpired. And in doing so, I didn't want to put my family in any harm or danger. And I knew at this point, like, I would be in danger or, in some kind of trouble. I didn't think anyone would believe this situation. As far as me explaining it to them, I didn't think anyone would believe it if I told it to them.
Mr. Edgecomb, the next day, did you turn yourself in, Mr. Edgecomb, or go to the police and explain what happened?
No.
A week from that point, did you go to the police station and explain what happened?
No.
Over a 6-month period of time, Mr. Edgecomb, did you ever go to the police and explain what happened?
No, but I did make strides as far as seeking legal representation. I was also in fear, even after.
Hang on. Let your attorney ask the questions, please. Go ahead, counsel.
So, Mr. Edgecomb, you just explained to the members of the jury for over 6 months, you felt like you acted in defense, and you're telling them that you were scared. Explain to them, what you were scared of over this period of time.
Not getting a fair, not being heard fairly, getting fair proceedings on my behalf, not being heard straight out, no one understanding, what had transpired. Who would believe from what I gathered over the days that were passing, like this, this was an attorney, a prominent attorney. I didn't even know that he had died until days later.
Now, days later, what did you hear about this incident? Did you, as far as the way that the case was put out in the media and information that you kind of learned over time?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, you indicated that you didn't know that he was even an attorney until a couple of days later, correct?
Yes.
All right. What other information did you learn about this situation or about how you were being perceived as immediately following this incident?
I had also learned that law enforcement had put out that I was the Brady Street killer. Not anything, speculated about, but that from any particular citizen or something. It was law enforcement that put out that I was the Brady Street killer.
Did that make you more fearful of turning yourself into law enforcement based off of learning that?
Yes. Even with the injustices that's going on and that go on in society. Even, with being here, in Wisconsin, which, has a largely black mass incarceration rate, I didn't feel like I would be heard out as far as, my side, as far as what had taken place on that date in September 22nd.
Now, is it true, Mr. Edgecomb, that at some point over the course of these 6 months that you actually went outside of state lines? Isn't that right?
Yes, that is true.
Why would you feel it necessary to go outside of the state of Wisconsin?
I had to get away from the state altogether. Also, too, I, just needed to get in contact with other relatives and whom could help me. I didn't, want to talk over the phone, so I felt, I could, possibly meet up with them in person to, seek or get some kind of legal representation or finances to help me to get legal representation.
Okay, so let's go here. Where did you go You know, you went out of state. Tell the members of the jury where you went.
I went to Georgia.
And what's in Georgia?
My father.
And at the time, did you feel like your father could offer up or potentially offer up some resources to help you retain legal counsel at this time?
Yes, but I never was able to meet up with them. So,
Did you go to any other family members out of state?
I contacted them, but I never was able to, meet up with them at all.
Okay. And have you had any communications with anyone locally in Milwaukee to try to get legal representation on your behalf?
Yes. It was like over a course of maybe every other day, I would contact my fiance, Ruby Mizell, and she would, just try to get and seek out legal counsel for me.
And did you or Ms. Mizell ever get in contact with legal counsel on your behalf?
Yes.
And what were you told from legal counsel upon getting in contact with them?
I was quoted different prices, ranging from $50,000 to $140,000, as far as these individuals and them, as far as them representing me.
Mr. Edgecomb, did you have the resources to pay $50,000 to $140,000 to get legal counsel at the time?
No, that was my reasoning, for contacting other family members and, going out of state and possibly meeting up with them, because I, knew I don't think no one would understand from my point of view, would understand over the phone. I felt like I needed to be in front of these individuals in order for them to understand the purposes and why I needed, this financial help. And plus, I had a GoFundMe prior to that, a couple GoFundMes that were set up. They were taken down due to, it says that they don't take care of criminal defense matters anymore. Everyone's monies were refunded to them, but that also became a setback for me, and it, increased the time span in which I was able to turn myself in.
Okay. If I'm understanding you correctly, Mr. Edgecomb, you're saying that there was a GoFundMe account set up for you at some point?
Yes, there were a couple attempts to have a GoFundMe set up in which I could get financial assistance to help with my defense.
And at some specific time, there was, substantial amount of donors that actually donated to your defense through GoFundMe, correct?
Yes, that is correct. All their monies, though, were refunded.
And was that a setback for you, Mr. Edgecomb?
A huge setback, because I wasn't in direct, I didn't feel safe contacting these individuals, or being around anyone, because I didn't want to put them in harm. As myself, I knew that I would, I was in harm's way because of the narrative that was placed out there as being a Brady Street killer by the police. So I'm thinking, upon, being pursued either by a regular citizen or law enforcement, I would be killed.
Mr. Edgecomb, at some point, did you ever change your appearance in any way to avoid being caught by law enforcement based off of these fears?
Yes.
Why did you do that?
I wanted to change how I looked just so I could, I guess you can say, buy me some time before. I didn't want to be noticed. So, during that, I just wanted to, depict and looking differently because, I didn't want to be killed ultimately. So I wanted to, appear differently and, get my legal representation and then turn myself in voluntarily. I know if I had a notion and an idea, just upon seeing on social media and different news websites upon seeing this guy, we're gonna kill him from regular citizens. And then, like I said, even the police department put out that I was the Brady Street killer.
Relevance, and that's been asked.
Irrelevant, sustained.
Now, Mr. Edgecomb, you end up getting taken into custody in Kentucky at some point, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Where were you coming from when you were caught in Kentucky?
I was coming from Georgia. I was headed back to Wisconsin.
Now, do you recall those officers asking for your ID at the time that you were pulled over in Kentucky?
Yes.
And what did you tell them when they asked you for your ID?
I told them that I didn't have one.
Mr. Edgecomb, were you truthful when you told the police department in Kentucky that you didn't have an ID on you?
No, I wasn't honest in that.
The Kentucky Police Department also asked you what was your name, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you give them the name Theodore Edgecomb?
No.
What name did you give them?
I told them that my name was Agu Newman.
Mr. Edgecomb, why did you do that?
It was like a last effort in order to, stay out of their custody. I feared them. I didn't want to be taken into custody involuntarily. My family didn't know where I was. I could possibly be killed in their custody, like Miss Sandra Bland was. So I didn't feel safe with them taking me in involuntarily, and plus I didn't have legal representation yet.
Mr. Edgecomb, when you were taken into custody, did you have a gun on you? Did you have that same firearm that you used on September 22nd?
No.
What did you do with the gun that you used on September 22nd of 2020?
As I was headed to Georgia, in between Indiana and Illinois, I threw the gun out the window. I didn't want to be caught with it and, give anyone, police or a regular citizen, any reasoning as to, killing me and saying that I was armed. And it, it being justified in that instant. I didn't want to give reason, as to, being opposed as a threat.
Mr. Edgecomb, do you recall the Milwaukee Police Department ever coming down to Kentucky to try to extradite you back to Wisconsin?
I remember them coming down to talk to me.
And do you recall the Milwaukee Police Department asking you about what happened in Milwaukee? And you replied to the Milwaukee Police Department what happened in Milwaukee. Did you make that statement?
Yes.
Why did you make that statement?
I didn't want to expound, and plus on, any situation that happened, and plus I didn't have legal representation with me at the time.
Mr. Edgecomb, how do you feel about what took place on September 22nd? How do you feel about, this tragedy that took place?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance is to his later feelings about what happened.
Sustained. And counsel, I'm not cutting you off, but it's noon. I'm getting the feeling this is close to being done with direct. Is that correct, counsel?
Upon consultation, I'll withdraw my objection to that question. That's fine.
If you could tell the members of the jury about how do you feel about, what transpired, that tragedy that occurred on September 22nd of 2020?
I never intended to hurt or harm or endanger anyone upon that date. It was a tragedy. I just, I wish it never transpired. I wish none of the events that occurred in that date transpired. I wish I would have just accepted being called a nigger, picked the food, picked up the food and, you know, just went back home, and I would have just dealt with it from there.
No more questions for Mr. Edgecomb.
It's almost exactly noon. I'm inclined to put this over across till after lunch. It's going to be a short lunch, ladies and gentlemen. We're coming back at 1 o'clock. I will start no later than 1:15. The jury can go out. You know the rules. Don't discuss this case. Don't deliberate. Don't do any research. Don't follow any media accounts. You'll be back, please, at 1 or a little after, and we'll start at 1:15. Follow my bailiff out. Everybody else can remain seated, please. All right, the jury's out. It's noon. We're going to take a